I don't know, man. I got like 51 likes on a TikTok I did the other day. My daughter, my youngest daughter, tells me that's nothing. She thinks I'm horrible because I only got 51 likes. Well, the 51st like was me, myself liking. But I've taken some of the podcasts and I'm going to take some of this and I break them down. And it's really kind of cool. I actually do that more as I'm trying to push out positive message on TikTok. Because if you've ever been on TikTok, there's a lot of trash on TikTok. I know I sound like an old man like my dad now. There's a lot of trash on TikTok. But I do think there's a lot of inspirational things. There's a lot of information. Like I like to barbecue. I like to, smoke. And, man, you can get all kinds of information about that, which is great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Harbor Time Strategy Talks. I'm your host, Colin Harbor, and things are blowing and going in 2021 for me. I hope the same for you. It's been an interesting month so far. We've had some crazy politics. Parts of the country has had crazy weather, just overall craziness. But 2021 is going, and as a matter of fact, the first month is almost over. So I want to suggest something to you right now. I want you to think about this. And I mean this. If you're listening to the podcast or if you're watching the video, I want you to take a moment and think about this. This next question is key for the rest of your year. Is it time for a pivot in 2021? So we're going to talk about pivoting in a little bit with our guest. We're almost through the first month. I'm looking down at the calendar here. It's January 26th. So for all intents and purposes, this month is basically over. The first month of the year of 2021 is over. That means you've only got 11 more months to go. 11 months to achieve your goals for this year. 11 months to reach those goals. So I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about it. What have I achieved so far this year? What have I done to move toward the goals that I've set forth? I'm always thinking about these goals. I'm always tracking them. I'm always wondering what I can do better to get to those goals. So when I talk about pivoting, I'm not talking about it in a bad light. A lot of people think of pivoting as waffling, or once you've set a course in a certain direction that you can't turn back. But sometimes things aren't certain. Sometimes things aren't going the exact way that you think they are. And even though you've got a clear path or that you've already set your path, I think pivoting is going to be key. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I appreciate everyone who listens to this podcast. I appreciate everyone who watches the video on YouTube. I appreciate the feedback I receive. And I don't think you know how important that is for the development of the podcast itself, my strategy around the podcast. So please leave comments, please like it, please provide me direct feedback, and don't forget to share the information with others. I think that's key. It helps me get the word out and get the message out. So when I first kicked off Harbor Time Strategy Talks podcast in 2020, I did virtually no planning, none whatsoever. Anchor, and I'm sure other tools, make it so easy to start a podcast. You just create an account, hit record, distribute it. All of a sudden, you've got a podcast. I didn't think about topics. I didn't really think about the planning that goes into these podcasts. I've listened to a lot of podcasts since then, and I know that there's an enormous amount of planning that goes into it. I was literally, though, flying by the seat of my pants. In some ways, I still do that. Early on, a couple of people generously, I might say, agreed to be on the podcast. Actually, everybody who agrees to be on the podcast is generous, I think. But the first couple of guests, I really just didn't do any planning. I sent a couple of topics, said this is what we're going to start, or this is what we're going to talk about, and we're just going to record it and go. And we did it all on audio, but I added video along the way. And so I don't feel like I did all the first podcast guests. I don't feel like I did them justice. So I pivoted throughout. And right now I'm kind of making a little bit of a pivot on the podcast. And The focus has been small businesses, mid-sized businesses, business strategy. How can you grow your business? What are some key areas, key decisions you need to make? But the last few guests, we've been talking about selling businesses, starting businesses, great leadership attributes. Who are great leaders? And so we're starting to go down that path a little bit right now. So in order to do justice to some of my earlier guests, I've decided to have, that's right, my first repeat guest ever on Harbor Time Strategy Talks, Justin Rand, and I'll introduce him in just a minute. But we're going to talk about pivoting. We're going to talk about leadership strategies. We're going to talk about leadership attributes. And we're going to have a great time talking about these things. Hey, Justin, thanks for joining us today.
What's up, Colin? Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad to see you. And, maybe we'll talk about the ukulele and the guitar in the background in a minute. But just to start off with, just as a refresher, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Justin Rand and what is Rand Consulting?
Thanks. So Justin Rand, that's a my wife would probably give you some different responses than I probably would, but basically background in the mortgage servicing, the financial industry. I spent my career once I got out of college in the mortgage space. And at the end of the day, I ended up being senior executive at companies like Citi, JP Morgan Chase, and Capital One. I've been in this industry for, I guess, over 19 years now, and really just trucking along, right? Trying to be my own guy. Now, today, I own my own company. It's a boutique consulting and services company. We predominantly do stuff in the financial services industry, a lot in the mortgage space, of course, but we've dabbled in other industries like healthcare and hospitality as well. So, we're really open to what we need to do. But our bread and butter and what we focus on is typically in that financial services space. We perform your general management consulting stuff, compliance and regulatory consulting, technology consulting. And then we do some HR-related activities with some direct placement or direct hire activities for some of our clients. And we do some supplemental staffing to help during peak times or for certain projects that need to get completed throughout the time. So that's who we are. That's what we do. We do have a social agenda that we try to focus on. Our company is dedicated and real focused on hiring the best people for the different engagements that we get. But the individuals that we target are those people in transition. So what does that mean in transition? Individuals that have been laid off from another company due to a reduction in force. Individuals that decided to go back to school and get a better or a different education so that they can change industries or elevate themselves in the industry.
People who pivoted maybe in that case, right? And since that's going to be a topic we talk about later, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, quite right. Early retirement folks, people that took early retirement with their company, but they're not ready to hang up the hat. The consulting and some of these contract gigs are real good for those individuals because they want to be able to relax and enjoy their time. But when they want to stay busy or do something, they can jump in and jump on a project. So we get a lot of referrals from people that have had individuals that are in that transition space. I did forget to mention individuals that took time off to take care of a dependent, whether that's a new child, an elderly person that they're caring for, or something else that was needed. But basically, we help with that transition back into the workforce, getting them some experience while they're trying to find that forever home if that's what they're looking for.
Thank you, Justin. That's great. As you know, I actually know all of that. And for everybody who doesn't know, I work with Justin on a variety of projects. I've worked on some consulting projects with him, business development projects, and overall strategy. And I've gotten to know Justin pretty well, I'd say, over the last year. Actually, in one of his previous leadership roles at a large bank, he was one of my key clients. At least he was over the group, the area that I was in. So we got to know each other pretty well, and we've stayed in touch through the years and really have gotten to know each other quite well over the last year. So that's how we've met and stayed in touch through the years. Justin also has a company or an app called Jeeper app. And we mentioned that on the last podcast, which is, I don't want to get into that today, but it is an app for Jeep enthusiasts. You can buy and sell parts, or you can look at a lot of things. I would encourage you to go follow it on Instagram or some of the other social media networks. That's JEPR Jeeper app. It's got like cool, some of the letters are capitalized, some of them are small. So, it's real trendy type deal. I'd say let's start with this question then, Justin.
Okay.
Let's talk for a minute about leadership. And I know that you have led large divisions or large groups, organizations within some very large corporations. You mentioned that, JP Morgan Chase, Citi, and others. And quite frankly, you're essentially leading I wouldn't call it a startup now, but when you started your consulting business, it was a startup, and you've grown and you have consultants now and other things. So you're leading that organization. But since I'm going to make you do it, I'd like for you to identify 2 to 3 key tenets of leadership. And that is to say, what do you think people look for in a leader in 2021?
2021. We've gone through, a lot of crisis in the last year, and that actually spans beyond COVID. A lot of the stuff that was impacted because of COVID has really driven a lot of chaos and crisis in a lot of industries and a lot of households. So for one, I think being a great leader in 2021, 3 things. One, being an inspirational. People like to follow people that they can get behind. Someone that's got a vision, that's got drive, that's able to put that in front of them so that they can really ensure that they're trying to be the best person they can be, the best employee that they can be. Envelop empathy is the second one. So, people are going through things. There's a lot of hard times out there today. That's a big reason for our social agenda, is the fact that I know that there are people that are impacted, that need help, that, don't know where to go. They don't know what questions to ask. And, for the contractors and the consultants that come through Rand Consulting, I've talked to every single one of them, and I spend time trying to help answer any questions they have, especially if they're a first timer in this consultant contractor world. How to price themselves, how to, what to expect, how to live, what to do, basically how to survive through this time, right? And then the last one is having a vision. I know I mentioned it a little bit, that being inspirational, but I wanted to emphasize it a little bit more. You've got to have a vision for where your operations, your business, your company is going. And even if it's related to departmental goals, right? Having a vision of what that should be and how to get there, and bringing the people that are with you along for the journey so they can visualize and share that vision with you and move forward.
Yeah, I think the vision, well, all 3 of those are great. Vision, you have to have a vision. Inspirational, and empathy, but inspirational with the last year. I mean, when you just think about the last year, I think so many people are looking for inspiration. They're looking to people. They're looking on social media for quotes, for video clips, anything to keep them going. But I think that is great. And you also hit on a key point. I mean, a lot of what I've focused on on this podcast so far has been small business, mid-sized businesses. But quite frankly, it doesn't matter if you own your business. If you're leading a team at a company, if you're leading a division at a company, those key tenets will apply no matter what. You need to have those things. And okay, well, good. So how do you stay on top of developing yourself as a leader? So for instance, I had a previous guest, Mike Harbor, who is a leadership guy, if you want to call him that, not related, by the way, even though we have the same last name. And, he was adamant about, you've got to sharpen yourself as a leader. We talked about, are leaders born or made? Well, everybody's born. We talked about You have children, Justin, so you see natural leaders emerge amongst them. But then what do you do to develop yourself? What do you do to develop yourself as a leader, and how can others do the same?
Constantly learning. It's the simplest thing. You've got to always learn what you don't know. Take the time. It's going to help build you up. I mean, you hear a lot of stories about executives that they always build their team to strengthen where they are weak, but that doesn't mean you need to ignore those limitations. There's something you don't know, something you're not good at. Take the time to educate yourself, learn as much as you can about the topic. So personally, I've got Audible. A lot of people do or have used Audible before. So you can purchase books and listen to them on tape. So as I'm jogging, driving in the car, whatever, I listen to several different books, and they range in topics. Some of them are entertainment, and then you've got for that relaxing element, and then but a lot of them are business books to talk about marketing. You mentioned my app earlier. I've got a mobile app. I've never built a mobile app before. When I built it from scratch. We now have over 15,000 users. The marketing element of that app, I'm on a limited budget, right? It's my own app. I'm trying to bootstrap that and build it up as much as I can. So everything's been done through social media. How to use Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. There's always some good things that you can learn. I wanted to share a book name. I just want to make sure I get it right here. That I listened on Audible. It is extremely long, but if you are a new business owner or somebody starting off, or maybe you have a business but you feel like you struggle a little bit on some of these pieces as you're growing, the book name is called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And I don't get anything for saying that. It's a really it's such a long book, but each section of the book can be read independently. So you don't have to start and read from start to finish. You can pick up on whatever kind of topic or subject you want to look at. So the guy gives a lot of great advice, and he shares it in great ways with a lot of anecdotes and stories.
That's good. And that's a great title of a book. And I think I'm going to look into that. And you hit on another key area that, again, one of my previous guests, Trent Simmons, who went to Europe to train as a professional triathlete. And he told it in the context of this trainer that he had, that they'd focus on, they'd work on their weaknesses, but they'd maximize their strength. So you hit on some of that, is if you've got some weaknesses, you can develop those. But I think Trent's point too, and most would probably agree, but maximize your strengths. That's where you can really capitalize. That's where you can really make an impact. So what is driving Justin Rand these days? What keeps you motivated and keeps you focused on moving toward goal achievement? So you've got a consulting firm. Let's take Jeeper out of it as a separate entity, but you've got your consulting firm. You've got goals this year. You want to grow. What is driving you, and what keeps you motivated moving towards those 2021 goals?
Absolutely. Got three things. And sorry if you guys hear the dog in the background. We're working from home in this COVID world. You got to deal with it. Number one is my family. I think that drives any and everybody that works in the world today. Even if you're not married or don't have kids, ensuring that you can provide better for anyone that's related to you and help out whenever needed is usually a common one. So that's number one. Number two are the people that work for me. So all the consultants and contractors, maintaining good client relationships, finding that next role, finding new jobs are things that are key for them, because again, they're in that transition phase. They're in something that is going to be, where they need that job. And then the third thing is the people that will be working for us in the future. Being in transition isn't everybody's in transition right now, and it no longer will be. It happens on a regular basis. And especially right now with this crisis, we've got a lot of people that are losing their jobs. They lost a lot back in 2020 especially in this mortgage space, with a number of the things that are going to happen, I think, here in the near future. I see more businesses probably going under because they're not able to hold out through the remainder uh, of the protocols that are going to be in place for consumers in the mortgage space. So that's a lot of companies on that default side of the mortgage space.
So Justin, you're a business owner, and we've talked about that. We've established that. And what I'd really like to know is, what advice would you give to a small business, or even a medium-sized business owner that's wearing many hats and just trying to make it through the day or the week wearing so many hats? So like for you, you wear a biz dev hat, you wear a consultant hat, you wear a CEO hat, you do the web page. I'm sure you might even take the trash out some. There's a lot of things that business owners do at companies. There are a lot of people out there like that, like you, like me, who have businesses and have to wear many hats. What advice would you give them to get through the day, to get through the week? What should they be thinking about as they continue to drive toward their goals?
So I think primary one is keep it simple. Keep everything simple. Keep your day simple. Keep your business simple, as simple as you can make it. Don't try to build up beyond your means. That's a big thing. Be a solution. So in every interaction I have, for the most part, business development side, the stuff that I do for my own self, and helping the people that work with us, everything you've got to bring a solution to a large degree. Your business, of course, if it's not a solution for something, people probably aren't going to buy it. Lastly, balance your passion with wisdom. And that could come in many different forms. One of the biggest things for people that are starting off, if it just isn't working, and it's your passion, and you're just not able to really get it to take off, there's a point where you bring your wisdom in to say, hey, should I keep trying, right, with this particular product, or should I pivot at that point?
Well, that's great. And I think might know what my next question is, or what our next topic is. But that I think that's key. And I struggle with this a lot. And I've talked about it on a previous podcast. I've talked about it with you. I talk about it with my wife, talk about it to myself all the time, is the concept of what's working and what's working and pivoting. So I mentioned that in the opening monologue, if you will, but let's talk about pivoting. And when I say pivot, at least in this context, I mean, like you said, hey, you tried something and maybe it isn't working, or maybe it's not being received in the marketplace the way you thought it would be received. So maybe it's time to pivot and look in a new direction. Maybe you have these goals and aspirations and you want to achieve something, but it's just not there yet. Maybe it'll be developed in a year from now, 2 years from now, but you need to do something now. And pivoting is not bad. So there is no way that I'm implying anything bad about pivoting. In fact, I'd say quite the opposite. Like I said, this weekend, I decided I'm pivoting in a couple of areas already. And I mean, the first month of the year is over. So it's okay to pivot. But let's talk about that. Let's explore it a little bit more about pivoting. Have you had any major pivots, or, if you know someone, you talked about empathy and working with consultants and other things. If someone comes to you and says, hey, this just isn't working, how do you encourage them to pivot?
Well, I mean, people try the consulting and contract routes thinking it's going to be this lavish lifestyle where they make tons of money. They don't have a 9 to 5, so they don't have to work.
Right. All consultants are millionaires, right?
Right. So people will jump into it and not really know. So obviously getting your feet wet and learning about it is one element, but you're essentially, if you're an independent consultant, you are your own boss. So work doesn't just fall in your lap. You got to go find it. Right. So that's another piece. And there's a lot of consulting firms out there, including ours. I mean, we're not always going to have a role for each person, but we're not the only company that's out there that's utilizing consultants and contractors. So getting out there and looking and finding the right thing for you is the best option. But outside of that, I did want to mention, you mentioned the whole piece about pivoting and why it's not bad. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, maybe your audience is or isn't, but there's a company that people know about very well today that when they started off, it wasn't what the company is today, and they ended up pivoting. You mentioned earlier things going wrong and pivoting. It doesn't always have to be going wrong. It could just be that you are listening to your customers, and based off of what your customers are saying that they want or they need, you end up pivoting your overall model to do something else. So that company I mentioned was Airbnb. So Airbnb sounds great. It's a mobile app, right? People probably used it that'll listen to this. They go and find a house, a room to rent or something for wherever they're traveling to for a vacation or for a business trip, just to spend the night. And regular individuals can rent out elements of their house or their full house on Airbnb. But that's not how they started. So Airbnb actually became that name, Airbnb, because the founders, where they lived, they had they had a convention center that was not far away from where their house was. It was two guys, they were rooming together in a house, and the convention center kept on having hotels that sold out. So people were going to the convention and the rooms were all booked up. They had nowhere to stay. They're like, hey, why don't we go get a couple of air mattresses, blow them up, throw them in different rooms in our house, and then charge people, $80 a night to stay there. And we give them a breakfast and coffee in the morning. And so that's what they did. They started posting that they had that availability for each of these conferences. And it became a big success. But then people started reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm going to a conference over here in this other town. What do you have for me? Mm-hmm. And, that's where they listened. That's where they ended up pivoting their overall model. It wasn't even really meant to be a true up company. It was really meant to be a way for those two founders to just earn some extra cash.
Yeah, I think your dog's very excited about that point that you just made. But yeah, there's probably a list a mile long of companies like that. When I think about Amazon, if I recall correctly, in the early days of Amazon, it was books, right? I mean, it was mostly about books and that kind of stuff. And look at Amazon now. But I hadn't really thought about it. Listening can lead to pivoting, or pivoting, the first step in pivoting is listening, because you're right. It's not just about something not working. It's about maybe something is working very well and you need to focus your attention on that as opposed to, focusing on 4 or 5 different things, right? If one thing's working very well, pivot by eliminating the others and focus in on the one thing and move forward. So that's very good. We might have to explore that topic a little bit more in the future. So who is your favorite business leader and why?
So I'm going to say this, and people might roll their eyes because I think when people are asked this question, a lot of people will say the same person. But I have it for a reason, right? So Elon Musk is that leader, okay? He's real eccentric, right? The reason, though, is he kept on being told by many people and other companies that his dreams and his vision they just wouldn't listen to it, right? That they weren't good enough. But now you look at him and people are sitting up and listening as all of his visions are becoming reality. So at the end of the day, what it tells me is that we should all inspire or we should all dare to dream. And then, chase those dreams if it's something that you think is worthwhile, right? If you think that you can make it a reality and it provides a benefit for others and you can make it into a business, I think you should do it.
So Justin, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, if someone wants to contact Justin Rand or Rand Consulting, what's the best way to do that?
Great question. Obviously, you can easily find me on LinkedIn, Justin Rand. You can also find my company, Rand Consulting, on LinkedIn. It's paired with my profile if you find me. Or you can go to our website. It's www.randconsulting.co. We do not have the M at the end of randconsulting.com.
Yeah, and that gets really confusing when I'm telling people. I always have to explain that there's no M at the end of it.
So we're trying to be innovative. We're trying to make that extra point so you remember us. So we took the M off.
So that's
got to remember.
That is great. I mean, that's a strategy, right? is choosing .com versus .co, or maybe randconsulting.com was already taken.
Or too expensive, one of the two.
Or too expensive, yeah. Either way, you can create a strategy out of it. The old one door closes, another one opens. So, well, this is great, Justin. I appreciate it. Like I mentioned earlier, you and I have gotten to know each other pretty well over the last year, almost just out of necessity maybe, or just out of the way things are. So I've really enjoyed that. And I really wanted to have you on the show today, too, to showcase some of your thoughts about these topics that a lot of my guests and my last few guests have been talking about. Leadership is going to be leadership's always key, right? I mean, leadership, there's never been a time when leadership is important. We can say now, because we have a pandemic and we just have a political change and we're coming out of some political turmoil and all of that. And, not to talk politics, but just as examples of things going on in the world, that we need a strong leader now more than ever. But I mean, really, do we need it now more than ever? We need it now just as much as ever, right? We need strong leaders. People need to develop themselves as leaders. And I would also say this, and I'm going to misquote him, but again, one of my previous guests said, look, if you're not sharpening yourself as a leader, you're just not going to go in the right direction, right? I mean, people who are sharpening themselves and making themselves better leaders are going to go in that direction. So,
constantly learning.
What's that?
Constantly learning.
And I like the whole listening and pivoting thing. I do think there's something to explore there. So, to our guests, thank you for listening. Like I mentioned, what's that?
Of course, it's always fun.
Yeah, and to everybody who listened, thank you. To everybody who provides feedback, thank you. Certainly appreciate you liking the podcast as well as the video. Absolutely love it when you share it with people. We will be pushing this out very soon and providing a lot of information on social media about it. But more than anything, I thank you for listening. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Great. Take care, Colin.
Bye.
Everybody. Bye.